Hello and welcome to today's Container EcoCast event produced by ActualTech Media. On today's event, you'll hear from experts at Nutanix and NetApp. My name is David Davis, and I'm excited to be introducing this event. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on this event. We at ActualTech Media created the EcoCast and MegaCast event series to help educate IT professionals on the latest and greatest enterprise technology. On these events, you'll learn about technology solutions from multiple companies. You'll learn about their different approaches and what makes them unique. And the best thing about it is you never have to leave your home or office. You don't have to travel downtown to the convention center or halfway across the country. We created these events to be very educational, and as such, we want you to ask as many questions as you'd like of today's expert presenters. And while you're learning, you also have the chance to win one of our valuable prizes. Now, before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping we need to cover. As I mentioned, we'll be giving a number of prizes away on today's event. I'll talk about exactly what those prizes are and the requirements to be eligible for those prize drawings. I also said I want this to be an educational event, so you'll use the questions and answers panel there on your console to ask as many questions as you'd like about today's container solutions that you'll be learning about. We also have some questions for you, so we'll be asking you a number of poll questions during the event, and we'll share the results of those poll questions with you so you can see how you stack up with your peers. We also want this to be a social event. I'll talk about the Twitter hashtag in just a moment. We'll be monitoring Twitter for comments and questions, retweeting and following just about anyone who's talking about today's event. And finally, we have a number of resources available for download. If you click on the Handouts tab, which is right next to your questions and answers panel, you can download handouts or click on links that are provided by today's presenters. Now, I should mention that you can drag or maximize the windows that you see there inside your audience console, and I encourage you to do that so that you can see demonstrations and architectural diagrams as large as possible. If you have trouble at any point, simply press refresh on your browser, and 99% of the time that will resolve just about any technical issue that you might have. If you are having trouble seeing or hearing the presentation, I encourage you to use a private browsing session. If none of those tricks resolve your problem on the event, feel free to use the questions box there, and we'll do our best to help you resolve it. Now, today we'll be giving out 3 $500 Tango gift cards. If you haven't heard of Tango gift cards, they never expire, and they can be exchanged for gift cards from major retailers like Amazon, Apple, Best Buy, and others, as well as restaurants, and they can also be donated to charity. So these are just as valuable as any other major gift card that you might be hoping to win. Now, the requirements for the prize drawings are you must be present on the live event to be eligible, and you can find further prize terms and conditions on our website, events.actualtechmedia.com. You'll also find the link to the prize terms and conditions there in your Handouts tab if you scroll to the bottom. Now, through the EcoCast and MegaCast event series, we've given out thousands of dollars to the charities that you see on the screen here. If you'd like to donate your prize value to one of these charities, we would love to help you do that. And if so, thank you very much in advance. Now, we said we want this to be a social event. The hashtag for today's event is Containers EcoCast. And actually, if you click on the Twitter icon on your console there on the bottom, you can actually tweet directly from your console, and the hashtag will be automatically appended. Now, you can also follow ActualTech Media on Twitter. In fact, if you click on the Twitter icon on the top right of your console there, that will take you to the ActualTech Media Twitter homepage where you can follow us. And you can also follow today's moderator. That's Mr. Scott Lowe. He goes by Other Scott Lowe on Twitter. Both the ActualTech Media and Other Scott Lowe accounts on Twitter are always talking about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology, so make sure you follow us to learn more. You can also visit our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and also subscribe to our 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. Now, before we jump into it, I want to talk briefly about containers, the state of container technology in the enterprise. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole education here on what a container is and the difference between containers and virtual machines. You can learn about all that over in LinkedIn Learning or pluralsight.com or a lot of other great resources. But I want to just briefly remind you the benefits of containers. Containers are a software construct, so an application is containerized inside a software fence, if you will. That's one way to think of it. And these containers, with their applications inside, kind of like an application package, almost like a zip file, are portable between development and test and production, and also between on-premises and up in the cloud, and even between cloud and cloud. So I can create a container on my laptop, I can ship it up to my servers in the data center, and it's going to run exactly the way it did on my laptop. Containers are also isolated, so the applications are more secure when they're running inside containers. They're also very small and efficient, much smaller in general than virtual machines. They're also scalable and agile. I can spin up thousands of containers in perhaps a few seconds. I can also use a text file to very easily create a container that contains multiple applications. For example, a database and a web server, as well as my custom data and web content, have that all built inside a container in just a few seconds, and then ship it up to be run in the development environment in the data center. Containers help us to create a microservices architecture. So instead of having these tall monolithic applications, we can create microservices, which are much smaller applications and services that all work together. For example, database servers, middleware servers, web servers, load balancers, all these things could be run in small containers that all work together as one, but because of their design, they're very agile and scalable and highly available. Development teams and DevOps teams just love containers, but containers are not without challenges. I mean, while it's very easy to deploy a container on a laptop, I can simply do a Docker run hello-world and have a container running on my laptop. They can be very difficult to deploy in a production environment with all the traditional enterprise-grade features that we're used to. I'm talking about storage, data protection, disaster recovery, persistent storage, monitoring, management, resource controls, load balancing. We might not be familiar with troubleshooting containers once they're deployed in these large microservices applications. And in general, it's my opinion that we need more enterprise-grade container solutions to help us solve these types of problems. And to be honest, these are the types of problems that we originally had when we started implementing virtual machines in our data centers. And over time, these enterprise-grade problems were solved with solutions from multiple different companies. And I'm really excited about today's Container EcoCast because you're going to hear about enterprise-grade container solutions from Nutanix and NetApp, two of the greatest innovators in the enterprise data center today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Scott Lowe, today's moderator, to do a few poll questions before he introduces our first presenter. Take it away, Scott.
And good morning to our good afternoon to our East Coast friends, and good morning to our friends in the rest of the country and around the world, hopefully. We have our first poll question of the day is up on your screen. It's basically asking how many people work at your company. We want to understand, as we always do, who we have in our event, and it helps us create future events and understand who we're actually talking to. And we hope you get a lot out of today's event on containers, where we're joined by Nutanix and NetApp, as David just told you. Our first few poll questions here, we're not going to leave them for very long, so please make sure you're able to answer those as quickly as possible, because this is great information for us to understand to help improve our events over time. And I am going to close this poll question so we can get going on today's event. We're joined by people from all over the spectrum, as you can see, and I'm going to put our next poll question up, which is, what is your industry vertical? Again, this helps us as we create future events to be able to target those events to what your needs are. So please take a couple of minutes to tell us where you work. What would you say you do here? As I would say in a classic movie, I would say. I love Office Space, just for the record. Actually, I gotta probably put the right slide up. I apologize. And tell us your vertical, and then I'll put the results slide up for you to take a look at to see who we are joined by today. To reiterate what David told you already, if you have questions, please make sure you ask them, and whether they're vendor specific to our who's joining us today, Nutanix and NetApp, or whether you just have general questions about containers. We actually, if you have a question about containers that's not specific to Nutanix or NetApp, ask it anyway. One of the ways we use the questions that we get during our events is to create blog posts and to create some content to help answer those questions. So everybody learns from the questions that you ask during the event. So please make sure you take the time, if you have any questions at all about containers, to ask them, because we will, in one way, shape, or form, make sure we answer them. And again, I'm not going to leave this poll slide up very long, so I want to get to Nutanix right as quickly as we possibly can. So I'm going to show the results for this slide. And as you can see, we've got lots of people from lots of places. In our last poll question, if you were to do a container solution, what are you looking at as far as the time frame? You're looking at basically immediately, sometime in the next year, sometime in the next 2 years, or sometime you're just not sure, or you don't have current plans to actually undertake a containers project. We've done a lot of research on this space, and it's interesting to see that there's a lot of adoption, but there's not always, a full plan behind all of it. And so it's interesting to see how this information changes over time as people sort of refine what they're planning to do, especially when it comes to all new technologies, not just containers specifically. All right, and without further ado, I'm going to close the polling slide. I won't be showing the results pane for this question, but for those that are interested, about 60% of you are not sure right now. About 14% or so are looking at projects within the next, about 15% within the next 0 to 6 months. And without further ado, we're joined by Michael Hague, Technical Marketing Engineer for Nutanix. Michael, take it away.
Thank you very much. So again, my name is Michael Hague. I'm a Technical Marketing Engineer at Nutanix. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years, and I primarily cover our automation product and our cloud-native stack. Again, so today we're going to be talking about Nutanix Karbon, which is our Kubernetes distribution, and I'll also touch on some of the other products that make up our cloud-native stack. So if you're not familiar with Nutanix, we'll cover a couple of things first here. We were founded in 2009. We got our start in hyper-converged infrastructure. So that's converging your compute, your storage, and virtualization down into one product. And that way you have a single pane of glass to manage all of those items, and gives you a lot of public cloud-like functionality in your own private data center. And just a couple more statistics. We have over 4,500 now employees. For 5 years now, we've had an NPS of 90 plus. If you're not familiar with Net Promoter Score, I would definitely go and check that out. And we're all over the world in all 6 of the 7 continents. All right, so let's talk about Nutanix Karbon. We're going to jump right in here. We'll dive into some of these other, more specific items in a bit. But Karbon enables you to rapidly deploy production-grade Kubernetes clusters in your own private data center. It is GA as of about a month ago. We currently support Nutanix AHV clusters, and we have a lot of kind of add-ons that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. I do want to mention that Karbon is fully CNCF certified. So if you are a current Kubernetes user and you have a lot of third-party tools and add-ons that you like adding onto your Kubernetes clusters, that's fully supported with Nutanix Karbon. And we also have, rounding out our cloud-native stack, we've got several other products. We'll talk a little bit more about our CSI driver later in the presentation, which allows you to get persistent storage to your Kubernetes clusters. We have an object storage product called Nutanix Buckets. We have a database as a service product called Nutanix Era. And then we have an application observability and monitoring tool known as Nutanix Epoch. And all of these products are out there and available to use. So let's take a little bit of a step back. Here, I do want to mention that regardless of, whether or not Nutanix Carbon sounds like something you might be interested or not, our core HCI stack at Nutanix is the ideal place to run your container workloads, regardless of if that's Nutanix Carbon or a different product like Red Hat OpenShift or Rancher. Due to the base and the core infrastructure, there's really not a better platform in order for you to run your container workloads. And we'll talk about the CSI driver and things like that as well that enable those. But if you're not familiar with all of these products on the left side, these are all kind of, all of the green items are our products. You're happy to reach out and learn more about these products with Nutanix. All right, so why Kubernetes, right? So if you guys are just getting into containers, about 3 or 4 years ago, it was pretty unknown as far as where the market was going to go in the container orchestration space. Both Mesos, Docker Swarm, and Kubernetes as well were pretty equal. And then about 3 years ago, Kubernetes has just taken off, and really the market has decided that that's the direction that the things are going to go. And there's a lot of benefits to Kubernetes, which we could spend a lot of time during this talk talking about them. But you guys are here for a reason. You're probably aware of a lot of those benefits. But also there's some challenges, right? Kubernetes, I saw in the intro talking about containers, right? It's really easy to use containers on your laptop, more difficult to do things in production. Similar with Kubernetes, right? So you can go out and use something called Minikube, and that allows you to stand up a Kubernetes cluster on your laptop, right? And it's pretty straightforward, and you can get a Kubernetes cluster going on your laptop in 15 to 20 minutes. But the production side of Kubernetes clusters and running it at scale is much more challenging. And then there's also the day 2 operations, right? So now you have your production grade Kubernetes cluster up and running. How do you manage it? How do you monitor it? It's quite different than traditional infrastructure, and that also can be challenging. So let's take a look at, if you go out and read some Kubernetes documentation online, and you can figure out how to stand up production grade Kubernetes clusters. These are the high-level steps. I'm not going to read every single task here, but essentially you want some sort of installer tool. You're going to need to stand up, your virtual machines and work through the etcd, which is the Kubernetes database, and then you have to figure out networking and do all of any of the pod. Once you can figure out which networking you want to do, you have to get it installed. Then you have to figure out storage and how you want to set up monitoring and logging. And then all those day 2 operations, upgrading, the host operating system, upgrading the Kubernetes version, figuring out how to upgrade the networking. And there's people out there that are very good at this, but they're also very hard to find. They're expensive. They're in demand. So it can be challenging, even if you do find someone like this, to retain them longer term. Compare that with Nutanix Carbon. These are the high-level steps, and we're actually going to go through these steps in a little bit when we get to the demo portion of this. But we essentially will create a cluster. It's a 4 or 5-step wizard that will walk through doing some basic configuration choices. You can drill down and change the defaults, but a lot of the defaults are good places to start with if you're not an expert. We have, a bunch of those, the logging, the monitoring, the observability, all of those add-ons we install for you automatically. And then we also take care of the upgrades. It's really simple to upgrade Kubernetes clusters, both the host OS and the Kubernetes version. So again, if you're familiar with Nutanix already, then this is going to be pretty similar to our traditional infrastructure and management. We pride ourselves on easy deployment, on simple management, the same pane of glass, getting those insights so you can take action, doing what we call one-click upgrades. Again, if you're not familiar with us, we use the mantra one-click quite frequently. And it's important for us to make these upgrades and these tasks that our end users need to complete, as simple as possible. And then scaling. Our core HCI infrastructure, we scale extremely well, so you can start small at 3 or 4 nodes and then scale as you grow. And same as that is true with our Kubernetes clusters with Karbon. We can easily add worker VMs, and again, that's something we'll go through during the demo. So storage, we haven't talked about storage quite yet. I mentioned earlier, we have our Nutanix CSI driver. So CSI is a newer way of doing storage in Kubernetes clusters. It's the recommended way. It essentially enables an admin. So an admin will create something called a storage class, and it's going to define some basics about that storage. So the speed, the number of amounts it can be, if read-write many versus read-write once, so essentially the number of pods that can access that storage. A couple other things. So, and then a developer or an operator would go and create a persistent volume claim. And that persistent volume claim will grab some storage from the storage class. So essentially what we have, Nutanix has a CSI driver. And again, this CSI driver can work with any Kubernetes distribution. So even if you don't go with Karbon, Red Hat OpenShift or Rancher can use our CSI driver if you're already a Nutanix customer and use our built-in storage to provide persistent storage to your Kubernetes clusters. So it'll tie in with Nutanix volumes and provide block storage, which gives you read-write once. Or it can tie in with Nutanix files, which will give you file storage via NFS, and you can do read-write mini with that setup. We also have, I touched on earlier, we have a product called Nutanix Buckets. This is an S3 compatible object storage solution. So in a lot of cloud-native applications are moving towards object storage due to simple HTTP requests. And so that is another option we have. So a couple of our other products I mentioned, so application and observability and monitoring with Nutanix Epoch. This is a SaaS product that you can easily monitor and observe both your cloud-native applications and your traditional applications, which is pretty unique as traditional and cloud-native applications generally work, and the architecture is so different. Traditional tools generally don't work well with cloud-native apps. We have our Era products, so database as a service. We can provision MariaDB and Postgres databases, and then we can also do data copy management for those, and Oracle and Microsoft SQL databases. And if we get a little bit of time in the hands-on, I can show you the UI. Just depends on how much time we get. And then we also have a large ecosystem with partners for container registries, secret management, things like that. So that is all the slides I have for you. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Give me one moment. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. So this is Prism Central. This is our multi-cluster manager dashboard. I only have a single Prism element cluster registered to this, so we only see one. But if we had multiple multiple Nutanix clusters, we would want a single place to go to manage all of those clusters. And within there, we have several different products that we can access. Calm is our application lifecycle manager. But today we're interested in Karbon, which I already have opened up on another tab over here. So we're going to go ahead and go through a deployment, a Kubernetes cluster deployment, so we can see how easy it is. So I'm going to click on Create. First, we have the option of choosing a development or a production cluster. Those are mainly going to tie into the number of master nodes. We see 1 versus 2, and etcd, which is the database of Kubernetes, 1 versus 3. All the worker nodes can be tweaked, as we'll see here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the production. I'm going to name the Kubernetes cluster. Again, if we had multiple Nutanix clusters registered to this Prism element, I would be able to select which one I wanted to deploy onto. I'm just going to leave the latest Kubernetes version available, and the host operating system. So we automatically curate and secure these host images, and we'll push them to the cluster automatically. I'm going to choose the more recent one. And now you can see we can go in and figure out where we want to deploy this Kubernetes cluster from a networking perspective. We can toggle and change the number of workers if we'd like, or the resources dedicated to these workers. For multi-master, we can actually do an active passive with 2 VMs, or we can do anywhere from 2 to 5 if we put it behind an external load balancer. So I'm just going to leave it as active passive for this example. And then etcd, again, we can do 3 or 5, as long as it's an odd number. We can do anything. And again, we can change the resource requirements for any of these nodes. Next, for the networking provider, currently we only support Flannel. We'll be adding Calico soon here. But since we only have Flannel right now, this is locked down. These are the Kubernetes, essentially the subnets available for the pods and the physical cluster. These are fine to leave as the default as long as this does not overlap with your physical host networking. And then finally, the storage class. So I mentioned the Nutanix CSI driver. Essentially, this is setting up each Carbon cluster that gets deployed will have the CSI driver installed by default. And this is going to create a default storage class for us using Nutanix volumes. Again, if we had multiple Prism element clusters here, multiple Nutanix clusters, we would have the ability to select one. I'm just going to go ahead and give it the rights to create a volume group there, and where we actually want to store it, which storage container, reclaim policy, and file system are all configurable. So I'm going to go ahead and create, assuming I typed the password in there correctly, and we did. So this is going to take about 10 minutes to deploy. Since we don't have a full 10 minutes today, I'm going to go ahead and come up to this demo cluster I deployed earlier today. We're going to notice here there's an upgrade available. We'll do that upgrade. We're also going to, before we do that upgrade though, we'll go through the UI real quick. We do have some alerts that are active in this. So Prometheus is the third-party add-on that gets added for alerting. So this is going to allow us to, look into seeing what is wrong with the cluster and take action based on that. Any tasks that we have, we'll see more here in a second, will be populated here in this UI. The storage class, again, this is the default storage class. We can also create new storage classes based on Nutanix volumes for read-write once, or Nutanix files for read-write many. Any volumes that get created from these storage classes will get populated here. And then add-ons, we have logging enabled by default. We can open up the logging dashboard, which is using Kibana. And you can monitor the entire cluster that way. I'm going to come back. I'm going to go ahead and what we're going to do is add a worker node. So we can pretend that our Kubernetes cluster is running great, but we notice that from a resource perspective, we're starting to run a bit low. And so we realize we want to add a worker. So we'll come up here. We can choose the number of workers. We can choose the node pool. Node pool concept is essentially a grouping of nodes with similar resources. And we're going to go ahead and choose a number. I'm just going to do 1. I'll hit create. This will take just a couple moments. Essentially, it's going to create a new virtual machine on the underlying cluster. get all the software installed that it needs to, and then register it to the Kubernetes cluster. While we're waiting on that, I can also show the host upgrade workflow. We see we have this upgrade available. When we deployed the cluster, if you were if you were paying attention close enough to see the host OS dropdowns, you saw there was a 0.0 and a 0.1. This is essentially just to demo the host upgrade. So you can imagine if some sort of vulnerability came out with Kubernetes or the Docker runtime or anything like that, we can quickly patch it and then push a new host OS image to you, and then you can very quickly and easily upgrade it through this UI. So let me see if the worker nodes, it's almost done, 70%. Once that's done, I'll go ahead and kick off the node, the host OS upgrade. See that running at 70%, so it's getting close. All right, and we see now it changed to running. Come back to the worker. We see this additional worker node that was added successfully. If we wanted to actually download our kube config, this is one thing I didn't touch on. We can download the kube config from the UI here. We can manage the SSH access from the cluster, and we can also upgrade the node image. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is the same pop-up we saw earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and hit upgrade. And this will take, again, probably about 5 to 10 minutes. It's going to upgrade in a kind of a one-by-one fashion. That way there's no downtime for your actual applications, but each node each virtual machine will get upgraded. So that's just about everything I have for you today. Again, this is Nutanix Carbon. We have some other products called Nutanix, my page logged out, Nutanix Buckets for object storage, Nutanix Era for a database as a service product, and Nutanix Epoch for application observability and monitoring to round out our cloud-native stack. Again, that's everything I have for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm going to launch our next poll question while we talk about a little bit of Q&A. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
We have a poll question up on the screen to ask you what you would like to learn about from Nutanix next, how you'd like to get some additional information. The first question we have is, can container objects be made compatible with different hypervisors?
Okay.
They're portable, right?
Yeah, I would say yes. And there's really kind of two ways we generally run containers. We can run them bare metal, so that's directly on, the host, the physical server. And maybe if you're going that route, you don't actually even need a hypervisor. The other option is then to run containers within a virtual machine. At that point, yes, you're more dependent on the virtual machine and hypervisor interaction because, again, as you mentioned, containers are portable, so really they can be run anywhere. And there's definitely between bare metal versus VM, where to run them. There's arguments to both sides, and I think both sides have some good points. At Nutanix, we run them within virtual machines because we find, that we think they're the benefits of, having that virtual machine portability, being able to easily vMotion your VMs and therefore your containers gives you some advantages.
This question we have is, how quickly will Nutanix support new major versions of Kubernetes?
Oh, yeah, cool. Good question. So, we recently, Kubernetes, I think, released 1.14 about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago. We're targeting after about 1 month, so 30 days or so, we will get it, make sure there's nothing, majorly different, and that we're compatible, and then we'll get that upgrade pushed out. The cool thing about Carbon, I mentioned earlier, it runs within Prism Central. but it itself runs as a couple Docker containers, so we can really easily and quickly upgrade Carbon to be on a new version. It's a pretty pain-free upgrade.
Can provisioning be scripted or deployed via Ansible, Chef, or Puppet?
Yes, we have publicly available or available REST APIs. So certainly all the operations I was showing within Nutanix Prism are all completed via REST APIs. So those same tasks can be done through REST APIs, and as far as I'm aware, Ansible, Chef, and Puppet all have the ability to integrate and use REST APIs. So yes.
And the next question we have is, does Carbon run on ESXi or is it just for AHV?
Today, it is just AHV. As I mentioned, we GA'd about a month ago. We are planning on supporting ESXi, but which will be later this calendar year. If that is something that interests you, definitely pass that feedback along to your Nutanix SEs so we can get it properly, roadmapped.
Sounds good. Michael, thank you so much for this presentation from Nutanix. It's always appreciated, and it's great to hear what's happening in the world of containers on the Nutanix platform.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And we're on to our next presenter. We have Chris Mers, who is the Principal Technologist for DevOps with NetApp. Chris, you have the floor.
Why, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on the webcast. It's a pleasure to be here. And today, I'm going to talk to you a bit about the enterprise-grade Kubernetes and container solutions that NetApp has brought to market. We're going to spend some time just with a little bit of background of why we've made this investment from a vendor standpoint and the history of how we got here. And then we'll get into the various enterprise-grade solutions that are available for containers today through NetApp. Okay, so what we're in right now is an interesting confluence of events that's happening, where we've been through the virtualization era, which started quite some time ago, around 2005, and it's I won't say coming to an end, but it's certainly the rise of cloud native is evident everywhere we look, and containers and microservice architectures. This is a developer-focused world. And there's a confluence of events that are happening that are bringing basically architectures in line with cloud-native technologies, whether that's in the public clouds or on premises in the data center. We see more and more private clouds and hybrid multi-cloud scenarios developing across all of our customer base and within the market itself. And this is, transforming IT along multiple dimensions. And as we can see here, it's time to new capabilities. In the traditional monolithic approach, it was a very slow time to deploy new capabilities to customers. In the virtualized era, it was a slightly faster, and now in the current cloud native era, it's much faster. And we can break this down into different buckets to slice and dice and take a look at what are the differences here: application architectures, the software development methodology, deployment vectors, as well as the application deployment mechanisms. So we've moved from this monolithic to a three-tier into microservices now, from waterfall to agile to CI/CD, continuous integration and deployment, and from bare metal through virtual machines and now into containers. The application infrastructure itself, from the data center to the private cloud, which I have in quotes because most private clouds aren't that cloud-like. I think there's something like 83% identification of private cloud, where only about 16% of those are really an IaaS private cloud. And today we're looking at a hybrid multi-cloud. Hybrid IT is the new reality for most enterprises. It used to be this worry about, we have our traditional infrastructure and then we have shadow IT, right, where developers are just going to the public cloud because they're sick of waiting for the lead times and deployment times from traditional IT. Well, the new era of hybrid IT or hybrid multi-cloud is where we've taken control and governance of that former shadow IT and brought it into the fold, creating a hybrid multi-cloud strategy. So what are, quickly again, I know we talked a little bit about this in the intro, but the enterprise benefits of containers, the standardized packaging, you're able to move your applications around through any type of benefit is that you have less overhead on the host operating system itself. Because you're not using guest OSs and you're just leveraging properties of the bare metal operating system through Docker or another container runtime like Containerd, you're able to basically fit more applications on a single server. It's the consolidation benefits that were previously realized through virtualization are even more extended into the container space with cloud native methodologies. So what is NetApp bringing to bear in this space? So obviously, it's the rapid deployment that's shortening development cycles. We focused a lot on Kubernetes, which is basically the cloud native. It's called the cloud native operating system, but that's a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's really an orchestration system that provides the baseline for an orchestration platform for all things containers. In the modern era, it's the underpinnings of all of the major containers as a service offerings throughout all the public providers. It is the most popular open source orchestration system for containers. It's the basis of things like Red Hat OpenShift, Pivotal, and various other types of container systems, orchestration systems. Basically, Kubernetes is at the heart of it all. As we've seen, it's a bit complex to deploy. People have had some heartburn with it over the last several years using it in production. So the idea of simplification and management of these systems is very key and central to the various enterprise-oriented offerings that we're working on. Also want to talk a bit about persistent storage. Trident is the open source project that NetApp primarily sponsors, and it's open to all contributors, but we have, of course, put a lot of effort into it to surface the enterprise storage management capabilities of all of the storage products that folks have come to love and know from NetApp into the cloud native ecosystem. And we'll take a look at that. And just a brief mention that we do have validated architectures with early leaders such as Red Hat's OpenShift, VMware Private Cloud, and various other ways that you can deploy containers on premises with the NetApp HCI and FlexPod products as well. Also want to talk about service mesh integrations for insights, control, security, monitoring, whatnot. And, we've partnered with Istio to ensure that there's deep integration within the NetApp Kubernetes service, which we'll be talking about here in just a moment. So Kubernetes is the clear winner in the container orchestration wars that happened a couple of years ago. Something between 60 and 90% of production deployments of containers are managed via Kubernetes today. So it's the de facto platform for running in the cloud native workloads today. So how is NetApp building a better cloud native experience overall? We aim to provide a consistent service consumption experience across all of the clouds. This is not just we're not just talking, one service or one particular area in which you want to deploy. The multi-cloud is a reality for many organizations, and it is becoming so for many more. Basically, this is a consistent consumption experience across all the various clouds, as well as we want to simplify effective containers as service delivery to the enterprise. The idea is that we want our developers to have as much maximum velocity as possible. We don't want the infrastructure to be in their way. Frankly, they don't care where their stuff is running as long as it runs. So we want to get the manual processes and lead times of deployment basically as a completely transparent process to the developer as well as the end user and consumer of the application. As we deliver these new services and applications faster via containers integrations, what we found is many of the leading Fortune 500 companies are already embracing NetApp public cloud services. And in particular, I want to talk about NKS. So NetApp Kubernetes Service, there's over 19,000 production clusters deployed today in all of the various clouds and across the managed service providers as well. And we're going to take a look at how that works in just a moment. So what is NetApp Kubernetes Service? So simply put, it is the simplest way to deploy Kubernetes. There's 3 clicks involved. And so it provides a Kubernetes-powered application orchestration and containers as a service option. You can federate clusters between clouds. You can create a service mesh. You can manage persistence with NetApp Trident, as I mentioned earlier. And it also integrates with NetApp Cloud Volumes, which is a service that we offer in all of the major hyperscalers to provide high-performance disk subsystem or persistence layers for running performance-sensitive applications. And this is something that we have worked with the hyperscalers to provide. This is a net new add of functionality to the public cloud. These were things that were not available or not mature in the current public cloud offerings. And in the case of Azure and Google, we've created tier 1 services partnering with them to create this functionality that was demanded by customers, and thus increasing the overall benefits of the public cloud. So in this offering, the NetApp Kubernetes service, you're also able to leverage curated application Helm charts. And a Helm is it's kind of like a package manager, something like apt or Red Hat Package Manager if you're used to RPMs. And it basically is a very quick way to deploy a prepackaged application. So we have curated Helm chart catalogs that are verified and optimized for the various clouds which they're deploying. There are certified catalogs as well as community catalogs, and you can bring your own Helm charts as well. And this enables a one-click experience for deploying an application. We're going to take a look at that in the demo coming up. So one of the things to understand about this is the main point here is that a cloud is a cloud is a cloud. The abstracting away the differences and complexities involved with deploying in the various public clouds, as well as coming up in the near future on premises, is something that we've been working very hard towards. So the idea is to have a single location, a single, if you will, control plane for your entire hybrid multi-cloud, and bringing this into synergy and alignment with the various other cloud offerings that NetApp has is something that you will see rapid development in. This is already a very mature service, and the great thing about this is that we're able to move at the speed of cloud. The updates, upgrades, additional features, these are happening on a continuous basis. This is the way that our business is moving here is CI/CD. So we're bringing new functionality to bear for our customers as quickly as possible, as well as things like new versions of Kubernetes, upstream versions. We have those available within 2 weeks. And all of the complexity of how to deploy and manage the system is basically abstracted away by the NetApp Kubernetes service. It's something that we basically want to take the headache out of that for all of our customers, large and small. This is from a single developer up to thousands of users in the enterprise. So with that, we'll go ahead and I'll run you through a little demonstration of how all of this works. So here we're logged into the NetApp Kubernetes service, and from here you'll be able to see whatever Kubernetes clusters have deployed. Right now I have 3 nodes deployed in US West 1A through Google Kubernetes engine. I'm going to go ahead and add a cluster. You can see you can add it from AWS, Azure, Google. There's space for credentials. You can upload your credentials here. And one more click. We could add solutions here at this time, but we'll just create the cluster. And with that, the cluster is being provisioned. In this case, it's in the Google Cloud, but it could easily have been any of the other 2. And in the future, we're going to have an option for deploying on-premise with our NetApp HCI offering, as we announced last year at NetApp Insight. So with this, we can go ahead and take a look, and we're going to deploy a solution. These are one of the Helm charts that we mentioned earlier, and they just added this last week. The one here at the bottom is the NVIDIA Inference Server, which is the ability to deploy basically an AI inference server that you can then upload. I'll install it here, upload an image to, and it'll identify what's in the image. And if there's GPUs registered within my system, it'll go ahead and deploy that successfully. So we basically now have an AI application running in the cloud with a few clicks. That's how drastically simple this is. So I'm going to download my kube control file, and then I'm going to go ahead and, using Microsoft Visual Code, I'm going to set the kube config, and I'll be able to manipulate that cluster and deploy an application to that same Kubernetes cluster using a YAML file. And in this case, I'm going to use deploy Ghost, which is just a blogging platform. And then I need to create a volume for it using persistent volume claim, using Trident under the hood. Goes ahead and creates that for me. And again, I'm deploying this in the Google Cloud from my laptop. You can see now it's trying to get the external IP provision. That'll take a couple of minutes. Just check it here. One more time, it should be there. All right, let's check it one last time. All right, so I've got my external IP. Should be able to go to this in the browser. Let me pull this up. And there's Ghost. There's my blogging platform. I was able to deploy that with minimal effort in the cloud. With a few clicks and a couple of commands run from my local system. I could have installed it via the Helm chart, or I can do it via my local application development environment. So, this is just a very quick demonstration, but it really highlights the overall simplicity of the NetApp Kubernetes service. Again, the goal is to get the infrastructure and all of the, the operations brain damage out of the way so that a developer can get to work and that applications can be deployed into any cloud environment in a production configuration within seconds. So this is what we've been working on. This is what, like I mentioned, there's 19,000 clusters of Kubernetes deployed into the various clouds already. Through NetApp Kubernetes service, there's more being added every day. And the types, we're working with our partners such as NVIDIA and various other vendors to ensure that the packaged applications are ready to roll. They are production grade, production ready. And the goal is to reduce time to value for all of our customers. And again, I can't give specifics on dates, but there's some great things happening with moving this technology into the data center for enterprise customers. We're very excited about that, so please keep your ear out for those announcements coming up in the near future. So one brief thing I want to touch on quickly is the persistence problem, if you will, for the enterprise, because containers were designed to be stateless, ephemeral. The idea was you spin them up and spin them down as you needed them. But as we moved more and more types of applications into containers, persistence becomes a challenge, right? So if you have these ephemeral containers, say you're running a NoSQL database or something, what if that container dies? How do you figure out how to reattach the proper data store to the container itself? And that's where Trident comes in. Trident is more than just a CSI integration. It's more than just a Docker volume plugin. Basically, it is itself a containerized application that runs in your Kubernetes cluster that manages all of your persistence. So the application workloads connect to the containers platform, and then underneath, Trident sits below the containers platform and abstracts out all of the orchestration of the persistence layer. And it also, more than just that, will surface the enterprise storage capabilities of a system like, say, NetApp ONTAP or NetApp HCI or SolidFire, even our E-Series, or even our Cloud Volumes offering in public clouds to your containers applications. These are things like disaster recovery, snapshots, also quality of service, the IOPS quality of service, min-max burst quality of service, so that you can create intelligent storage classes for your containers that require persistence. This is a very, very powerful, I won't call it a product, it's a very, very powerful project. This is not a product, this is not something that we sell. It's an open source project that we maintain and invite all contributors to. But it is the most fully featured storage abstraction layer for cloud native systems that exists today. We've had an amazing amount of customer interest and customer success with this. And in fact, here's just an example. Recently worked with a major networking company to create a containers-ready enterprise cloud for their product engineering. This is for their main product engineering. And this is not a small-scale architecture. And I'll get into that in just a second. But the solution requirements, they needed an internal development cloud. They needed cloud-native integrations. They needed cloud-ready infrastructure. And they needed extensible storage for persistence, quite a bit of it, actually. And in this case, NetApp HCI was the heart of the thing. And then we used Trident as the abstraction layer for persistence, and then the Element software, which is the basis of the storage for NetApp HCI and for the SolidFire product lines for NetApp, as the persistence layer. They also wanted to bring in a bunch of existing estate that they had. They had a bunch of compute that they wanted to use to scale their container systems with. So this is 15,000 servers. 15,000 servers. And it's a fairly simple stack. The developer's code to containers deployed through Kubernetes, through the compute layer, and then Trident manages all of the abstraction of the storage persistence. And this is a massively scaled system on premises that leverages some of the best that NetApp has to bring to the containers landscape and the cloud native landscape at this time. So just wanted to leave you with that. We're not talking about, we could do this for a single developer, but where we're focused and where we've pretty much always been focused is the enterprise, for 25 plus years of NetApp's existence. So I know a lot of folks see NetApp and they go, oh, wow, you guys, you're the storage guys, right? And yeah, we do storage. We do it well. We do a lot of other things as well. So if you're interested in what you've seen today, I encourage you to reach out. But more importantly, click here if you're interested. Just click on cloud.netapp.com. I believe this is a click-through interface, and you can get started today. You can there's a 30-day free trial. You can be deploying containers and applications within a few minutes after this webcast. So thank you very much. I don't know where we are on time, but that's pretty much all I've got to present today, and I'd love to continue the conversation. You can reach me at MERSDBA on Twitter, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that presentation. We do have some Q&A. While we're doing Q&A, I'm going to launch our next poll question. And again, this is about what you'd like to hear from NetApp. So, Chris, the first question we have is, can I leverage Terraform on NKS?
Yes, you can. And in fact, we recently partnered with Terraform to release a Terraform integration for NKS. So you can build out your system in an automated fashion across whatever cloud or multi-cloud situation that you're looking to take advantage of for your enterprise.
And I'm gonna ask some questions that were answered by Aubrey from your team as well, because I think they're good for everybody to hear. Can we just use Trident without NetApp HCI cluster if we want to?
Absolutely. You can use Trident with right now it works for NetApp products, but again, it's extensible if one so wishes to other storage systems. But yes, Trident is free. It's available today, and it works with all of the major NetApp product lines.
Okay, next question is, can NKS federate Kubernetes clusters? Oh, it just scrolled, hold on. Can NKS federate Kubernetes clusters across multiple hyperscalers?
Yeah, I didn't spend nearly enough time on that in the demo, but you can federate your clusters together across all of the major public clouds so that you can, it's kind of a belt and suspenders approach in some cases, or maybe you're taking advantage of capabilities that exist in the various cloud providers that are differentiated from each other, but you want your application to work as a seamless whole. You can federate the clusters together, absolutely.
We have one question that's really a one-on-one question, but I think if one person has it, I anticipate lots of other people have it. So in this context, is a container similar to a Unix virtual session? It shares the kernel but has segregates memory and other things. So I guess the essence here is, what is a container?
So a container is a segregated or basically gated portion of the operating system. It does have its roots in the Linux container construct, which was an outgrowth of, if anyone remembers, chrooted jails, where you would basically change the root of the operating system and you would basically cordon off a space of system resources for a particular application or user to run in. So it's the same concept, it's just taken to a much more mature level. So it is basically a slice of the underlying base operating system without all of the overhead of a guest operating system sitting in between. You're basically getting rid of the middleman at that point. So it's kind of merging those concepts of the true-to jail and the virtual machine, but doing it in putting in only what is needed, the binaries and the differences, and then the system resources themselves in a segregated and gated kind of format.
And that's one of the ways that they're fundamentally different from virtual machines. A lot of people try to conflate containers and virtual machines, but they're very, very different constructs.
Yeah, they very much are. Virtual machines actually absolutely have their uses, but containers to date are the most efficient way of running applications that we've devised.
Sounds good. Chris, that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much for your presentation today, and we always look forward to seeing NetApp on our events.
All right, thank you for having me.
And we have a few final housekeeping items we need to go over. First is make sure you're aware of our ActualTech podcast, where we give away some Tango gift cards here in just a second. If you want to listen to some really great conversations with James Green on ActualTech Media's team and some industry luminaries, please make sure to subscribe on iTunes to the 10 on Tech podcast. We also want to make sure you're aware of how to sponsor an event. If you're a vendor, contact us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, for next week, we have a pretty significant EcoCast coming up that we think the audience will be interested in. We have building a next generation data center. So if you're looking at what you need to do to move to the future with your data center, we're going to be here with Switch, Pure Storage, Western Digital, DriveScale, Veeam, NetApp, and Nutanix to talk about what the components you need to consider should be in a next generation data center. And with that out of the way, we have to announce the winners of some gift cards. So we have 3 Tango gift cards, and we are giving them away to you. So the first winner is Scott McEntee from Virginia. The second gift card is going to Timothy Gary from Indiana. And finally, we have Andrew Oswald from Ohio. All 3 of you will be hearing from Melina at ActualTechMedia.com. So if you have spam rules or something, please make sure you let her through so she doesn't have trouble getting in touch with you. As always, thank you very much to our audience for joining us. And also, thank you to our vendors for participating in today's event. Everyone, please have a great day.